Welcome to BrandBusters with your hosts, James Schwinn and Sean Lee. Together, we bust open the latest in CPG, retail media, and life, or whatever the we want. And for today's episode, we got something special cooked up for ya. Extra spicy. Take it away, Sean.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the latest episode of BrandBusters. And we have an excellent guest today. We have Daniel Schindler, who's the CEO of Buoy, a brand that's changing the future of hydration with liquid hydration drops. Buoy's sold at D2C, on marketplaces, and in brick and mortar. Buoy's been rapidly and profitably growing, and we're excited to have Daniel on the show today. I know I reached out probably a few years ago as we were looking at potential brands that we could acquire for the Cincy Brands portfolio. So that's how I first met Daniel. And I've been really impressed with his quarterly email updates that he sends to investors and potential investors. Just following the progress of Buoy. It's a pretty awesome story. So great to have you on board, and thanks for joining us, Daniel.
Excited to be here. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, cool. Well, to kick things off, one recurring theme with our guests is this career pivot. So it looks like you went from a software consultant in your early days to actually founding Buoy. So talk to us about what was that transition like? What did you apply from kind of the software background experience to building a brand?
Yeah, definitely. I'm thankful for that experience because it showed me exactly sort of what I didn't want to do with my life, and the horrors for me of some corporate jobs. Not that it was a bad company or I was treated poorly. It just wasn't anything that I truly wanted to do or that I was passionate about, and it was sort of just that daily grind. And so I actually saw my older brother doing his own startup, and always knew I wanted to explore some sort of startup, but thought it might be further down the road and, I'd get some more experience first. But then first job out of college as a software consultant moved me out I was in Michigan for undergrad and then out to St. Louis, which was sort of my territory for my clients. And quickly showed me that I wanted to do something different. And the idea for Buoy came to me actually while working and traveling as a consultant for that job. As I was super dehydrated, traveling, drinking coffee in the morning, beer at night.
Brutal.
And so one thing led to another, and here we are.
Yeah, that's great. How did you come up with the idea for Buoy? Obviously, hydration's, pretty saturated. There's a lot of package. You've got liquid IV. Obviously, your take is different with the drops. But what led you to kind of create it and find something in the market that you didn't think was already being served?
Yeah, so I was aware of at the time, and this is 7 years ago, like 2016, 2017, but I was aware of liquid IV and obviously Gatorade and some of the other things that were around. But the idea really came to me when I was at a corporate happy hour, and I had sort of drank coffee in the morning and was actually drinking a beer at the time, a few beers. And I wondered, what if something could be added to all these different types of drinks without really affecting the taste, to help them be more hydrating and just keep everybody more hydrated, regardless of what you're drinking. So that's how the idea popped in my head. And I was already sort of unhappy with the job. I gave a couple buddies a call and talked about the idea, and we just started running with it as a side project for a bit. And then I quit my job about maybe 6 months after that day and went back to school in St. Louis to get my MBA at WashU with the sole focus of creating this purposely unflavored blend of electrolytes that could be added to any type of drink. So, and we can get into more about how we're different and why we've sort of chosen to create the product in the product line that we have now. But we were able to partner with a pharmaceutical expert named Dr. Lee to create what's normally very bitter and salty, a super clean version electrolytes that could be added to any type of drink. And that's what got us going.
That's awesome.
Yeah. On that note, hydration remedies really seem to have trended up the last several years. You guys might have been not necessarily, a first mover or at least very early adopter of like kind of addressing that need. Like, what do you feel like with consumers has driven that trend for hydration? Is it like the younger millennials and Gen Z not consuming alcohol as much? Is it just stepping into like that corporate phase? To your point, like if we all travel or on the road, you're not drinking a lot, you're not hydrating properly, like on the planes, and then you got the coffees and the caffeine, which dehydrates you and can constrict your blood vessels, and then obviously the alcohol intake. Like, what's leading to this flurry of hydration aids in the market now?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a few different answers. I'd actually point to, in terms of the new brands popping up, I'd point to the success of Liquid IV, now being $1 billion brand, and so much opportunity to make it better, and easy, right? From a powder packet perspective, it doesn't take much money. You can improve on Liquid IV's formulation by yourself. You don't need a scientist or formulator to do that. And so you could turn around and create your own powder packet company, which hundreds of other brands have done now.
Yeah, it seems like there's 1 million of them on Amazon now.
Yeah, there's 1 million of them, right? And so we spent years for that reason, knowing that there's always going to be competitors and markets can be saturated, creating something new and innovative that's totally different and much more effective and healthier for you, for hydration. And so our whole perspective on hydration is totally different than the Liquid IV use case, the Gatorade use case. All of those companies are traditionally revolving around the athletic use case of like, I just ran a marathon and I need to rehydrate because I'm very dehydrated type of thing. For us, it's about all day hydration. How do you optimize your all day hydration throughout the day? Because the reality is, when you consume all those electrolytes of Liquid IV or 3 times X, 3X with Element or anything else, your body's passing through most of it before you get a chance to use it. And so you really need a steady flow of electrolytes throughout the day. Just excuse me 1 second. Let my
Very good. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Just for the audience out there is trying to find like a different niche, which I think they've done, and we'll get into a little bit more with it being more of a kind of a liquid that you can pour in versus the powders that like you said, everybody can kind of spin up and do. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting too is as a user myself, is I look at like Gatorade or Liquid IV, a lot of like some of the ingredients are just, high sugar, like not the type of things that I'd want to be consuming all day if I wanted to stay hydrated, because it's just excess calories that I'm not really looking to have.
Exactly.
So
yeah. So, and we wanted our goal was to create this product that's not only super convenient because you can add it into any type of drink, but it's super clean. So that goes to avoiding all of the nasty shit that you'll see in most of these other products, like all these different sweeteners that have different names, and some try to claim they're healthy, but especially on an everyday basis, they're probably not. And I would prefer sugar over most other sweeteners, if I'm going to consume anything. But then also even natural flavors, right? A lot has come out about natural flavors just being a blanket term for hundreds of chemicals that you have no idea about. And the list goes on. And then it goes into, well, what form of electrolytes are you using? Are you using just a sort of baking soda type thing, sodium bicarbonate or any sodium citrate, all those types of things? Or are you using a sea salt that comes straight from the earth and with those 87 trace minerals and all the other good micronutrients that you want to put in your body? And so we wanted to combine all of that and make something just so much better. Again, both more efficient and healthier for you and convenient, compared to everything else on the market. And I think that's why we've seen so much success, is we sort of had have really had our coming out party over the last year and a half with some ad spend behind us.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, it seems like, how did you think about it in the early days? Did you raise some money? Were you self-funding? It seems from your newsletter that you're very focused on profitable growth, which I think is incredibly smart for a CPG brand right now. Like, you saw so many that were just focused on top line, and then the easy money and low interest rates dried up, and the party was over. So how'd you get started in the early days, and how do you think about sustainably growing a brand in today's environment?
Yeah, the first steps are always the hardest. You have no idea what you're doing. Your spend is probably 95% inefficient, and you're just sort of running around, but you just have to have that strong, resilient mindset to just keep pushing no matter what, and follow that 5 or 10% of success that can keep sort of avalanching into something more. From the fundraising perspective, we knew we needed a bit of money just to get off the ground. And I'm very jealous, or I admire the brands that really don't need any outside funding. We got a little bit. So we did bootstrap it between the 3 of us early on. And then we were lucky enough to have a strong friends and family network to raise a few $100,000. That also helped with some connections that I had through Washington University, and just being a little bit tied into the startup space. I think that first little bit is really important. So you're not playing that daily cash flow game, which is tough, very tough, and it's distracting from growth, especially early on.
Especially when you're investing in inventory and minimum order quantities, like you can sink your cash flow pretty quickly.
Yeah, and so I'm a big believer in raising some money early on to get things going, focus on the right things. We ended up just having a rolling convertible note over the first few years and just slowly increasing the valuation as we had more traction. And then we felt like we had enough traction a couple years ago to kick off our really only main fundraising round, which is our seed round, which we ended up raising $2.5 million. So we've raised a few million to date. And that was amongst just different angels and angel groups. We had Chris Paul also come in, the NBA player, which has been awesome as he just loved the product and we connected with his agent. But we're careful not to take early money from any sort of venture capital or bigger groups. I think that oftentimes is a mistake. And then from the profitable growth standpoint, we were able to create such a profitable business model that once we kicked off and started to really spend on marketing, we were able to create a system that works profitably from day one. And so it's interesting that, it took 5-6 years to go from, $0 to $1 to $1 million in revenue. And then 1 year we went from 1 to 20. So
overnight success.
Yeah. Not quite overnight, but that's how it goes, spending the time to build everything right and be confident in what you have before you spend the money to truly get it out there.
But I think that's super important, what you just said too, and especially in consumer goods. I mean, there's a time and place for venture capital, but I think if you take that way too early, especially where a lot of venture capital firms are used to investing in fintech or SaaS, they're going to push you to spend a lot of money and to grow as quickly as possible. Like that's how they're going to get paid out. So if you would have taken a ton of VC funding really early on, you might not have had 6 years to get to, to slowly grow to $1 million and then hit that inflection point to get to 20. They probably would have pushed you to, spend and make some early mistakes that might not have led you there.
Yeah, totally. And I think the transition you've seen over the last few years, it all starts at the top from like acquirers. So acquirers are looking at different companies. If they get burned by companies they acquire, such as a lot of the ones that have grown at all costs, or ones that don't get acquired at all, but they make it to that top line goal that they thought would get them acquired. But then acquirers are like, no, where's the profitability? We're going to get burned on this one. So we've learned a lot from that. I've talked to a lot of different investment bankers and just learning more, starting from the end of what's the end goal, where are we trying to go, and realizing we need to focus on profitability, not just top line growth, if we want to have a goal of ever exiting. Yeah,
I think that's incredibly smart. How do you think about, like, as you're thinking about keeping people, whether it's your friends and family, your seed round investors, even like I made it onto your newsletter, I think you do a wonderful job of kind of articulating what your focus is for the quarter and then where your end goals are. I think you mentioned 100 million in revenue and getting there profitably. What led you to kind of that approach? Because I think from a lot of founders that I've talked to, you're probably one of the best of kind of building a distribution list and sending out that quarterly update on a consistent basis, which is great. Like I read them even if I don't respond or say anything. I think it's really cool what you've done. But how do you think about managing your investors, and how did that quarterly newsletter come to be?
Well, I appreciate the kind words. It means a lot, and obviously a lot of effort goes into that. And I had a good coach as my older brother. He said, it's so important to grow your network and keep people in the loop, whether you're doing well or not. And everyone can come in with different things that can be helpful, which happens time and time again. And as we're asking for different retail connections or investor connections, there's always something that can help the business. And so I just formed this habit of making sure to always keep people in the loop from really very early on. I forget the exact time frame that we started it, but now that we have a ton of investors on the cap table and a huge network, it feels like almost an obligation, which is good. It keeps me honest, and I want to make sure everyone's updated. And it's great, especially now how much success we've seen, to be able to share this journey with everybody and really feel like a cohesive group.
And kind of going off of that with network, you're based in San Diego now. Ironically, a lot of the kind of clients, brands, and partners that I work with and interact with, it seems like San Diego is kind of this hub for D2C or brands and e-commerce. Like, what have been the network benefits for you, like being in San Diego? And I guess like talk about your experience there, because it's like this is a recurring theme with individuals I'm talking to in your space over the last 12, 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's the best city in the world. I love it. I've been out here for about 5 years now, and I love to surf. I love the ocean. Bowie's also from the ocean, and just I have like a special connection with the ocean. And so I think for me, I've met some really cool founders out here, and have a solid network. But I think even more important than that has just been having this city that I love, that I can really like connect with, and keep me spiritually grounded, and have tons of different things that I can do outside of work. So that's why San Diego has truly been so special for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to pour your heart and soul into it and put in a ton of hours, you might as well do it in a place that has great weather and sunshine 24/7.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, my dog was barking again.
That's
Yeah,
great.
for our listeners, Daniel has I think a new puppy addition to the family. So
Yes, he does. Usually he keeps me grounded, but sometimes it's tough to manage him on calls.
No, that's great. Fine. And it seems like you guys obviously have a website, direct to consumer presence, a presence on Amazon and marketplaces, and have expanded into retail. How have you thought about your omni-channel approach? Obviously, each of those three channels kind of have their own challenges and kind of own cost structures, but how have you thought about that, and in particular your brick and mortar strategy as you're growing the brand towards 100 million?
Yeah, that's probably changed the most, I think, since we started. We initially got an opportunity to partner up with CVS about 4 or 5 years ago. We were probably the earliest stage brand ever be in CVS. And it was a connection through Wash U that I had, and we couldn't turn it down, even though we knew that drug probably isn't the best place for Buoy. And so we did that, and actually saw some decent success early on, and got some good awareness, even though no one had ever heard of Buoy at that point. But it gave us a good flavor of like the challenges in retail. And it also was a good traction point to help us raise money for, like, we weren't 100% sold that brick and mortar was like going to be the dominant channel for us. And it's not. Like, our 98% of our growth right now is D2C and Amazon. But it gave us enough traction and experience to understand the retail space in a little bit more detail, and understand what we need to do moving forward to make that channel work for us. And so we got an opportunity with Walgreens as well, but since with both of them are actually transitioning out into a different retail strategy. And so we want to scale. Our goal right now is to scale to 100 million top line, primarily still from ecom. D2C is about 4-to-1 compared to Amazon for us right now, and we want to keep it that way. But we've gotten lots of feedback that to grow at a certain point, you'll always hit some sort of plateau in ecom. You see that with Athletic Greens and a bunch, right? CACs just will go up, and the only way to counter that is to just keep AOV and CLTV continuing to rise as well. So we're working on a launch with Wegmans next year.
Nice.
And we really want to do retail right this time, with a real launch strategy and money behind it, and now have the awareness going into it from a brand perspective. So it's not people's first time seeing Buoy on the shelf. Our strategy is to actually go slowly. We potentially could have tried Target first, or one of the bigger guys, but we wanted to be strategic about who we worked with, and then continue to step and build that channel over time until we exit, and use it more of a sales story and proof of concept, rather than scaling it all on our own, because retail is really the toughest channel to scale as an early stage brand.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we've seen that a lot. I think we've talked to a ton of people that have went into drugs, so CVS and Walgreens, which I think is a tough channel as a new brand with minimal awareness, just given the people are going there usually for a very specific reason, not necessarily in discovery mode. And we've seen a lot of other brands have success with regional grocers like Wegmans, HEB, Meijer, people like that. And then obviously there's the Targets and Walmarts that are a different beast, but not trying to tackle them all at the same time, I think is a super smart strategy of doing one for a year, getting that down, making sure you're kind of hitting your units per store per week and you can drive enough awareness, then adding a second, kind of like how you built the brand over time and not rushing it. Otherwise you get upside down pretty quickly with all the inventory requiremements. And, if you get discontinued, it can be pretty tough.
It's a mistake for most brands to like depend on retail, especially because you can only really afford one retailer and they can cut you at any time. You just have no control over it. And it's really a beast and you don't have enough money to truly launch there until you're, I would say, at least like close to the size that we're at now. And so for us, I wouldn't change anything. It was a good, it worked for us as a proof point, as traction, and helped us raise a bit more money and legitimize the business a bit more. But from a business model perspective, it's tough, even if you have amazing margins.
So one thing we see, so Sean and I were at Amazon agency once upon a time, and then kind of in my current capacity, I'm kind of meeting, consulting with brands on their omnichannel strategy. But a lot of times, we get in the conversation of assortment. And when you're talking about D2C versus Amazon split, but how do you think about assortment? A lot of times we see the Pareto principle at play. So I see like 80% of sales coming from 20% of your catalog. Do you tend to see like, hey, our hero ASINs continue to drive growth across like all channels, or are there certain products for you that are performing better that surprised you in retail versus online?
Yeah, our hero ASIN, we only had sort of one main product for a while, our hydration drops, and every other product has what the hydration drops include with additional functional ingredients on top. So it was only till like this year that we truly put an emphasis on expanding our product line and seeing how the other products would do. And we were actually amazed by how much the hydration drops are still our hero SKU, but much less dominant than they were. We anticipated them to be compared to the other products like digestion drops and brain health drops, rescue drops, specifically more on the chronic illness side. So yeah, we've always just wanted to be very purposeful with new products that we creating stuff that's not really out there right now, or that we can innovate on to be cleaner and more convenient for our customers.
Got it. You just mentioned chronic illness. I think that's something going through your site. Again, we look at a number of brands each week, and I think there's always, especially in like the health and wellness space, there's kind of the aesthetic versus efficacy, and you guys seem to have like the efficacy piece down, but also like the brand aesthetic, right? Like it's not just buzz. It's not just buzz. I think you're actually, you've got a great product, great efficacy, but also like there's a missional component of it as well. Is that push on supporting like chronic illness, is that tied to, anything from your personal experience, or is that just something like you and the team are passionate about kind of supporting through the growth of Buoy?
Yeah, I'd say it's a bit of both. My co-founder, Eddie, was hospitalized 27 times before he was in the second grade and has always had that stick with him from like a health perspective, not living with a chronic illness now, but aware of some of the sort of trials and tribulations that come with it. But it really came to us when we launched Buoy. We just want to create this super clean, effective, convenient product. And it happened to just resonate the most with chronic illness customers. And so like one of our first customers was a mom with a daughter who had POTS and other chronic conditions. And she was taking 6 liters of smart water to school every day to try to stay hydrated. And she was able to replace that with 1 bottle of Buoy.
That's awesome.
And just feel more normal and seen. And so we ended up just connecting with so many different people with chronic illnesses that had amazing stories. And that really became the heartbeat and sort of the lifeblood of our company, and giving back to those communities as well, and trying to donate as many bottles as we can to support them and make them feel heard. We did our first marketing campaign. It's called the To Be Seen campaign, where we just featured different people with chronic illnesses and shared their stories. And it was just amazing to connect with them. And that's something I'm, as a CEO, want to get more back into, connecting with customers, because that's been part of my favorite, one of my favorites, part of the job.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I was going to ask. So, given that your primary strategy is D2C at Amazon, you said that D2C is about 4-to-1 of Amazon right now. What are some of the marketing channels that are performing the best for you? Obviously, there's Google and Meta that are kind of the tried and true. Are you seeing any emerging channels like TikTok or TikTok Shops or any influencer strategies that have really been working for you?
Yeah, I'd say so. What really drove our growth? One sec, Ollie. What drove our growth was through Meta initially. So it was finding that, and I think that is typical for most startups. They just have such a good algorithm and platform where you can focus on conversion.
Yeah, it's really the best targeting for conversion.
I think a lot of other channels are great when you can get more into like into the awareness game where you're basing your decisions more on CPM than you are CPA or CAC. So yeah, we for the most part, what drove this huge growth has just been through Meta traditional ads, and we've started to throw in the mix some TikTok, Google, a little bit of influencer spend as well. But Meta continues to be the best one for us so far.
That's great. Anything that you're doing on Amazon that's kind of enabled your growth there, beyond just kind of the normal strategy of finding the right search terms and ranking and maybe a little bit of DSP?
Most of our Amazon growth has just been an effect of the Meta spend. So we direct our customers to D2C, but plenty of them just end up going to Amazon. But because we are strategic about the split between, we only offer like our core SKU right now on Amazon. We're going to expand it a little bit soon, but we want most people to stay through D2C and incentivize them with better pricing through subscriptions and be able to only access most of our products at this point on D2C.
That's great.
Yeah, I think one of the trends, especially a lot of brands, I think there's two emerging themes right now. It's like incrementality and attribution. I think for challenger brands and kind of more of a niche category, one of the things that everyone's focused on new to brand customer acquisition, and Amazon's that great channel where it's a little bit more frictionless, right? Like the Meta is amazing for the awareness play, but if they already have the Amazon account, they don't have to input their credit card information. It's like, you know what, my first purchase I want to do here, I have a phenomenal experience with that product. I'm going to then jump to D2C and try all your other products. So higher purchase frequency on Amazon, higher AOV on D2C, and they can both neither have to cannibalize each other. They can work harmoniously together. So I think I love kind of the approach. Your approach really models, I think, the theme that we've seen where we're seeing people push awareness. Obviously, you want the sale on D2C is typically more valuable to you than on Marketplace. However, Marketplace serves as a great channel to drive faster time to conversion. And if they get that new to brand purchase, they can jump into subscribe and save. And now you have all of a sudden this like healthier revenue stream and foundation to build off of. So again, just more or less kudos. I feel like you're running that playbook well, because that's something that not all brands are doing. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think it's super crucial to have that strategy mapped out before you launch and get after it, because I would always be hesitant to have more than 20-30% of our revenue coming from Amazon, because like retail and like any other channel besides D2C, you don't have full control, and there can be stuff that comes up and you're off. And so I think it's very important to have that healthy mix and know how it plays with one another, and like you said, not cannibalize, but flow from one to the other more systematically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Tell us a little bit more about the Chris Paul story. How did you find out that he was ordering the product, and how did you get him involved, and how are you using him today?
Yeah, so we actually connected with his agent through one of our board members a couple of years ago, and so we sent him the product initially for him to try out, and one of the first times he tried it was actually our energy drops. He replaced his sort of pregame espresso and ended up having like a career high 3-pointers, which we want to claim. It's all Buoy, but
it's amazing.
Yeah, he really liked it. He has a huge emphasis on clean ingredients, so we just kept talking with him, and he ended up meeting with him, and he became an investor and advisor for us. And then we did a cool campaign with him where we launched his own sort of CP3 secret stuff drops.
That's cool.
I've got a bottle. So it's sort of modeled after like the Michael MJ secret stuff from Space Jam.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's cool to just vibe with him and meet him. He's an amazing guy, and has a very big emphasis on health and wellness, and is always trying to find the sort of cutting edge technology and different products that he can use for both himself and spread across his whole massive network.
Yeah, it's awesome. Any advice that you have for people that are listening that may want to work with a celebrity or kind of get a celebrity involved as an influencer or an investor?
I think just make sure it's authentic. There's so many, especially nowadays, that people will just sort of see through as a paid play, like a paid influencer celebrity play. And that's not that effective for your business. Your money can be spent elsewhere or better elsewhere for the most part, typically. So I'd say just with everything you do, but specifically that, if you're gonna have any sort of partnership like that, make sure whoever it is actually loves your product and what you're doing, and is in it for the right reasons.
The other community you seem to be tapping into is medical professionals. What's it like navigating that network? What's their reach been like? Obviously, influencers and affiliates are a massive focus across all brands right now, but I think that's a unique angle that Buoy and you are also supporting as well.
Yeah, we got into that pretty early because so my mom's a doctor, and so she's the first medical professional giving out Buoy to her patients very early on. But as we started to connect with other medical professionals, especially any sort of holistic health practitioner, they're the first ones that are in our target market. Our target market is really label readers and natural eaters, right? The people that know what they're putting in their body. They're looking at the ingredients on the back of a label. And so as we connected with more healthcare practitioners, we realized they're the bread and butter for us, and they're the ones that are going to recommend a lot of things to their clients who truly need Buoy a lot of times, and they're using other products that aren't great for them, or they're not using other products because they know there's something in there that's not good for them. It's been awesome. And so our chief medical officer is the director of perioperative care at UPMC. He came in a few years ago with just seeing a huge opportunity because there's so many. Dehydration is the number one cause of complications after a surgery, both going into the surgery and after. People are just dehydrated. And so he wanted to actually help us clinically prove the efficacy of Buoy compared to other products. And we ended up just doing that. And our first clinical trial came back proving that Buoy's 64% more effective than water alone and 49% more effective than a leading competitor. That study was geared against Noon, the tablets.
Oh, yeah.
But it was all showing that it's much more effective to get your electrolytes throughout the day versus these single servings. And these single servings, as I mentioned earlier, they have different ingredients in them that aren't just unhealthy for you, but a lot of them are diuretics. So sucralose, stevia, those actually offset a portion of the hydrating components of electrolytes. And so it's kind of counterintuitive that when you're consuming an electrolyte product that has, let's say, stevia in it, because that's partially offsetting the hydration from it.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, I can't really take a lot of the artificial sweeteners. They just kind of like make my stomach feel wrecked, or I just feel like I'm not absorbing things well.
Sean needs some dude wipes. Needs some dude wipes.
Right? We'll have to get him on after all this stevia.
Yeah. I will say I take a fair amount of supplements, and I know like the bioavailability, like it's so interesting. Like, oh, I'm getting like this great dose. By the end of the day, like depending what's actually in there, I think people don't realize that, hey, you're actually getting 50% of what's actually featured from the serving size, just from what your body can actually metabolize versus what it can. So.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so many. I could go on and on about several different leading competitors and how I don't believe that. Like, I think a lot of times their products might be causing more harm than good. Don't get me wrong. There's specific use cases for most of these products that can be very helpful, especially for athletes and for people that are just sweating a ton and just need a very quick, massive dose of electrolytes. But when people start using them in the mainstream and they're just sitting on their couch trying to stay hydrated, or they're doing a little mini workout, going whatever they're doing, which isn't running a marathon, that's when it's like, do you really need to consume 50% daily value of salt at one time?
Yeah.
I don't think so. No, you don't. And that actually can be more, can cause some harm depending on who you are and what your sensitivity is to a lot of salt.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So obviously, like with the focus on growing profitably and kind of doing it over the time period that you have, how do you think about building a rock star team and keeping your team lean? Like when do you know is the right time to add somebody, and how have you thought about building the team out at Buoy?
Yeah, for the most part, it's been we've had much more focus on contractors because especially early on when you're pivoting all the time, it's much easier to be flexible with contractors. The only people we have a very lean team even now. It's the three of us co-founders and three other people full-time, one of which was just onboarded, and then a bunch of awesome contractors that have been with us for years. The only people that we consider to onboard full-time are ones that are just so crucial to our business, and we know we need them for the long term, and they're just superstars. And so the way that we go about building our team and even considering anyone that for a full-time position, you have to work in a sort of part-time or trial capacity with us for at least 3 months to prove that it can work and everybody vibes well before we'll then have a conversation of can this make sense full-time?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, our and my perspective on it is to just stay as lean as possible when it comes to full-time people for a lot of reasons, and really only add the people that we just can't. We just need them, and we know we need them for a long time.
Yeah,
that's great. It's kind of one kind of undercurrent of this conversation, kind of emphasizing like people and relationships and network, whether it be like ecosystem of like San Diego or certain connections at WashU, your mom being kind of like the first like medical, supporter, to the board member connection to Chris Paul. I mean, Sean and I have some history in terms of like, we both went to University of Cincinnati. He was kind of a mentor, graduated a couple of years ahead of me, helped set me up with my first co-op. And then we got to work together again 10 years after the fact. Like, what would you encourage to people that are maybe earlier in their career about like, hey, making best use of their time? Obviously, there's a lot of maybe negative press around college specifically or in a remote first environment post-COVID. Like, how can they maximize building their network and being really intentional about that if they feel like, I think just some good advice around that, because I've seen that play out in my career being a benefit. You clearly have with building a brand, but definitely want to get some encouragement to the listeners on that.
Yeah, you know what? I think for me, it all started with doing something that I'm passionate with and having that energy and that mindset. And so starting out, it was really crucial for me to develop that that resilient mindset, that do whatever it takes mindset, but also having that focus on something that I was passionate about and would provide this positive energy around me. And I think people can pick up on that. And so I think the first thing in terms of building your network and even thinking about your career and where you want to be in 5 or 10 years and what you want to do, it's first, pick what you want to do. Pick something that you're actually passionate about and take what might seem like a risk, and do it strategically, right? Don't just quit your job that you hate. That's not what I did. I was doing this part-time for a while and then went to business school and continued to create it for years before we even launched the product. But that's all what led to me building an amazing network and having amazing conversations with amazing individuals, because the energy is vibing and people can tell, and you can tell with other people when they're passionate about what they do. And so I'd say start there and then just be super open with who you're talking to, and try to get past those initial feelings of nervousness to just connect with people and try to really build a healthy community.
That's great. Well, I think we're probably about at our typical time. So we just hit 40 minutes, and I think it's been an awesome conversation. For everybody listening, go check Buoy out, follow Daniel send him a request on LinkedIn, follow him on Twitter or X if he's there. You always welcome to follow James and I. Send us a request. We're pretty open. I think all three of us here are pretty big about building networks. So if you heard anything that you liked, don't hesitate to reach out. And if you found this conversation helpful, please share it with your friends, family, colleagues, and let them know they can find BrandBusters wherever they get their podcasts. So Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and YouTube. So thanks again, Daniel. We really appreciate you joining today. And I learned a ton. I'm sure James learned a ton. I know our audience must have learned a ton.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And anyone listening that wants to get in touch, yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or shoot me an email, and would love to connect.
Great.